Hi, I'm David Terrar and welcome to the live stream news and interview show Cloud Industry Forum presents TWF, courtesy of our friends at Disruptive Live. I'm the CEO of Cloud Industry Forum, which is a not-for-profit, membership-driven trade body that champions and helps accelerate the adoption of cloud technology and services. We've got members like Lenovo and Kaiser PR and Acronis and Broadcom and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Softworks and Wolters-Kluwer. If you want to find out more about us, we're at cloudindustryforum.org. TWF goes live on Monday mornings at 10 o'clock UK time. Each week we start with tech stories that have sparked our interest and then we interview a guest. Today it's one of our members talking about the vital topic of sustainability, but there'll be lots more about that later. We're on the lookout for guests to come on the show, so if you're doing something that supports or is supported by secure and trusted cloud technology, then we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us in the comments here on LinkedIn. You can email us at info@cloudindustryforum.org. I'm at DT on X. I'm David_Terrar on Threads, or Google me. You'll find me. Now, for our news section today, I'm actually taking the opportunity to go back to something from the start of this month. On the 5th of October, Ofcom published their study of the UK cloud services market, raising particular concerns about the position of the market leaders, Amazon and Microsoft. The study found the pair had a combined market share of 70 to 80% in 2022, with Google, their closest competitor, with a share maybe up to 10%. The report was referred to the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, and I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I'd be setting out Cloud Industry Forum's reaction to this news. So that's what I'm doing today. In the CMA's release on the scope of their market investigation, Kip Meek, chair of their inquiry group, says cloud services are an essential part of how businesses in the UK operate, and they underpin many of the aspects of our daily activities, from banking to communications. This is why effective competition in the marketplace is so important. Now, actually, I think that sentence kind of encapsulates what the Cloud Industry Forum is all about. Cloud services underpin the UK digital economy in all of its forms. We've got members who use Microsoft and AWS and Google for infrastructure, members who partner with them, members who compete with them. As a trade body, we're technology agnostic, but we fiercely support the solutions that our members deliver. We need open competition for a healthy marketplace and for the agility and the scalability and the innovation that cloud provides business. So we support any interventions that promote fair practices and a more level playing field. It doesn't feel to me like the CMA have got a strong case. Ofcom highlighted three things. They highlighted egress fees and technical barriers to interoperability and portability, and then kind of discounting things. Price, the way discounting works for some customers. Those issues around those three kind of certainly exist, and hopefully the investigation will uncover the scope and impact of any unfair practices in those areas. But as we've always advised, the key here is both transparency on the part of the vendor and education and awareness on the part of the customer. Only then can businesses go into a contract fully informed of all of the ingredients, the potential barriers, the benefits, and the risks. What's the current competitive landscape like? Well, I've actually been in this space for a long time, and I've lived through successive waves of new technology approaches. I don't see today's competition as any different. However, I am seeing that practitioners of cloud financial management, FinOps, are on the rise, and that's all to do with the complexity of the options and the pricing and the choices that we have. It'll be interesting to see if we see increased competition through increased specialisation in the market. Now, I'm surprised this investigation is happening now rather than, say, 5 years ago. But the objective of a fair marketplace that encourages rather than stifles innovation has to be supported. The deadline for responses to the CMA's issue statement is only Thursday, the 9th of November, 2023. If possible, I'd like the deadline to be extended so we've got more time to canvass the opinions of our members so we can add a more representative response into the start of this process. But apart from that, I'll wait and see what the evidence and their conclusions are. The report will actually be published in April 2025. Does this present an opportunity for the marketplace? You can't disagree with a fair and competitive landscape. And I've always been keen to see that startups and small and medium businesses doing well. So if there are any unfair practices that are uncovered that help, then that would obviously be a good thing. It's late in the day to be raising these issues, but I come back to the point that we've always had major players, and so much of this is business as usual. However, I'd argue that the technology market in 2023 is the start of a new inflection point. And with the explosion of generative AI and with the mixed reality metaverse-like experiences and more all coming at us continually, all supported by cloud as an enabler, things are different. A lot will depend on the findings of this investigation, but also on business expectations and needs and demands and the provider's ability to meet them in a fair, efficient and effective way. That's what we think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So if you've got some comments, please get in touch with me. And so let's switch gear and talk sustainability. I am delighted to be introducing Gregory Lebourg from one of Cloud Industry Forum's members, OVHcloud. We're going to be talking about the sustainability topic and hearing about how their company approaches it. So Gregory, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself and the company.
Yeah, good morning, David. Thanks for welcoming me in that very interesting show. So I'm the Global Environmental Director for OVHcloud, the European leader in the cloud service provider industry.
Excellent stuff. Now, I know OVHcloud has a big focus on the sustainability topic. Why is that, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so maybe we have to go back to the very foundation of the company more than 20 years ago. That company was founded by Octave Klaba. It's still a family-run business, but it's very important to stress that point because since the very beginning of the company, it was decided to be very independent. And in order to be independent, they wanted to cover all the value chain of the cloud industry, meaning that not only we design our servers, but we do manufacture them, and we do manufacture as well. We do build our data centers moving forward. The control we have on this value chain gives us a lot of levers to activate some technologies to mitigate the impact on the environment. And maybe to understand better what impact we are talking about, let's focus on the four main ones. The first one and foremost is related to the climate change. And that relates to the CO2 emissions, the carbon footprint, which is emitted on a yearly basis by our industry. The second one relates to the hydric stress. Most of the people don't know it, but we need a lot of water to cool down the systems in the data center. And that water today is scarce, so we have to pay attention to this one. The third parameter, which is highly important, is what we call the adiabatic resources depletion. This industry calls out for a lot of minerals, a lot of raw material, rare earth. And we need to be very frugal in the way we approach that because the resources are declining. And the fourth parameter, which is very often put aside, is the fact that this is an industry, right? So we need buildings, we need data centers, and they require a massive footprint. And this is what's called the earth artificialization, and we need to pay attention to that parameter as well. So basically, this is the way we handle that topic of sustainability by trying to solve the issue on those four factors.
Excellent. Now, let's go back to the first of those factors, the carbon footprint of your cloud service. How do you approach that?
So the way to approach that is, number one, to measure it accurately. So since 2019, we have put together a very strong methodology to be able to count the carbon emissions of our activity. We do report them on a yearly basis, by the way, and they are audited to make sure that they are sincere and accurate. But maybe to understand better what we talk about, maybe let's go back to the very structure of this carbon footprint. The carbon footprint should be considered in three scopes, three categories of emissions. The first one is what we call the direct emissions. And long story short, in our industry, those emissions are mostly coming from the use of fuel in our backup generators, whenever there is a cut on the grid or for proactive maintenance to make sure that they would start whenever we need those backup solutions to work. That's globally for OVHcloud close to 1 to 2% of our global emissions. The second category, which is scope 2, which is called indirect emissions, is coming from the electricity we use. We are highly intensive in terms of electricity usage because servers need electricity in the first place. And to produce that electricity, we need primary sources of energy. And it depends on the type of energy you use to produce electricity, but that generates carbon. Globally, those emissions account for 42% of the global emissions of the company. And then, last but not least, the third category is the scope 3, which is the upstream and downstream emissions. And just remember one thing, most of it is coming from the server manufacturing itself. Okay, so by looking at those different categories, we can easily find out the levers that we can activate to bring that down, because that's the objective we need to set up. And just to give you the commitment we made publicly, we want to be contributing to net zero initiative on scope 1 and 2 by 2025, which is tomorrow, and to extend that contribution to a net zero initiative by 2030 to scope 3. And in order to reflect that properly, we are entering the assessment of what's called the SBTI, the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is a good way to define the trajectory moving forward that we want to put on our activity to make sure that we would meet that goal in the mid-run.
Excellent. Very comprehensive. Now, I've heard you talk about the circular economy. So can you explain that and how that changes your thinking?
Yeah. Circular economy is about not wasting things which are produced by our processes and that can be reused. That's the theory. So let's take concrete examples. As I said, our servers, they need electricity to run. And in return, they will generate massive amount of heat. Should we recover that heat, we would be participating to this circular economy approach. And practically speaking, we have put in place a couple of initiatives recently. So let me walk you through a few of those. First one is the backup generators I was mentioning. They need to be preheated to make sure that they would start very quickly upon demand. And in order to do so, we need electricity. But there are other ways to preheat those big devices. And one of them is to use the heat coming from the data centers, to use the source of energy to make sure that they are kept warm. This is something that we have worked very hard with, manufacturers like Cummins. And as we speak, we are introducing that technology of preheating via waste energy in our data centers in Roubaix. Okay. Number two is the ability to reuse the components. We have to consider our activity at a component level. So let me give you a concrete example. One server is manufactured, they are installed in our data center, and they run for, let's say, 4 to 5 years. After their first life, they are going back to our factory. We've got 2 factories in the world, one in the north of France and another one in Canada. And those servers, they are completely disassembled. And 100% of the components coming back from the field are tested. If they are working fine, and if they fit in the new bills of material to create new servers, then they are put back in stock. That's a typical way of doing eco-circularity, because we can reuse and we can give a second life, even a third life to components such as CPU, GPUs, motherboards, or RAMs, for example. And that's a good way to save, as I was mentioning, resources to create new components.
Excellent stuff. Now I'm going to ask you about something else that I've heard you say, which is you've used the phrase sustainability as frugality. What do you mean by that?
Okay, frugality, again, in the value chain can be considered at every stage of the value chain. Example, in the data center. Frugality is about, for example, not wasting energy. It's all about power effectiveness. So we are working hard today to improve what's called our PUE, the power usage effectiveness. It's an indicator which is a ratio between the amount of electricity you consume on your data center divided by the amount of electricity that you really need to make the servers run, and a bit of network equipment as well. The closer to 1, the better you are. Today, if we look at the average of the industry, it's 1.57, as per the Uptime Institute, who made a very interesting study on that matter. Within OVHcloud, we stand at 1.28. So we are way better than the average of the industry. And the main reason is because we have a unique water cooling technology based on closed circuits, which capture the heat at the very source inside the server to bring it outside of the building. This is very efficient in terms of energy, but still we can improve the situation. We can improve the situation at the distribution level. All this distribution of power in a data center, you'll see here and there some losses in the transformers, losses in the cables, losses in the UPSs, for example. And by working on new designs, by choosing the right type of equipment, we can gain some efficiency, and this will even decrease the power usage effectiveness. And same for the cooling technology. Even though we are doing at an industrial scale that water technology since 20 years, we are still working with our R&D to improve the solution. And just to give you a concrete example, we are now entering in our 5th generation of water cooling. And according to the calculation we've made in our R&D department, and by looking at the prototype that we have put together in our labs, we see that there is a decrease of 50% in the energy needs to cool down the same thermal load at a server level. So you see that's continuous improvement, obviously, and it's a good way to be frugal. A second type of frugality is, for example, to not use workload which is not necessary. What we've done recently is that we've changed the way we orchestrate our installed base of servers. We are a booming industry. We need advanced production in our data center. We need servers available for the growth of our customer and to make sure that we would meet our service level agreement whenever there is some issue in the existing platforms. But still, by being smart and by putting some new algorithm in place, we can put those servers which are not creating revenue, which are not calculating for our customers, we can put them, I would say, in an idle mode, or even we can put them off so that we save unnecessary energy. So you see, there are a lot of levers that we can activate to be frugal at our level. And obviously, if we look at the end of the value chain, the customers, they have to be frugal as well on their side. And they have to pick up the right type of cloud instances that would fit their requirements. Let me give you, again, an example on that one. We have put together more than 10 years ago what's called an eco range, which are servers with a second life or third life. So they are not really up to date. They are not the best of breed, but still they do the job and they are very useful for some non-critical workloads. By proposing this type of servers, second-hand servers, to make a long story short, we participate in that frugality.
Excellent stuff. This is all fascinating. Are there any kind of global standards that fit into this?
There are some global standards. So number one, there are standards to measure properly your environmental credentials, your environmental impact. So I was talking about the PUE. There is the WUE as well, which is the water usage effectiveness. There is the CUE, the carbon usage effectiveness, a bunch of indicators. They can be considered only if they are calculated according to standards so that we are able to compare apple with apple between different players. That's the number one. Number two, there are some standards coming from regulation. As we speak, there are a tremendous amount of new rules, new laws which are being built up or even being enforced to push the industry in the right direction. Eco-design directive at the European level. Same with the energy efficiency. So you see there are a bunch, of things which are constraining the industry, but again, they are constraining the industry for the benefit of everyone. And things are getting more and more homogeneous between countries. We still see a big difference between North America versus Europe and versus Asia Pacific, but things tend to be, I would say, harmonized.
Okay. Excellent. Now, you've spoken about how you approach it, and you've spoken about getting the customers to be frugal. How do you approach it with your suppliers?
That's the very important topic. And this is part of the science-based target initiative I was mentioning about. Let's go back to this carbon footprint analysis. Scope 3, indirect, upstream and downstream emissions. We don't have the solution at our level. The only stuff we can do is to embark our suppliers to make sure that they would go in the right direction. So practically speaking, what do we do? Number one, we engage with our suppliers to make sure that on their side, they have some commitment, they have some target to decarbonize their activity. That's something they need to do, but if as a company they don't do it spontaneously, that's a prerequisite that we would put in our contracts moving forward. That's number one. Number two, by really understanding, for example, on the carbon side, the emissions related to some particular components, we are able to choose the less emissive one, I would say. With the same performance, with the same cost, we can really make up our mind and go the route of the component which has less impact on the environment. So it's all about exchanging information, and it's all about putting governance with them. And I'm super happy to say that most of the industry, the upstream industry, is playing the game and is going in the good direction. So I'm quite positive about the outcome.
Excellent stuff. Now, I actually want to go back to something that you touched on in an earlier answer, but I just want to emphasize it. I mean, this kind of transformation that you've done, it's not a single project. You need to think about this in terms of continuous improvement. That's right, isn't it? You've got to kind of compete with yourself to do better.
Yes, sure. And it's all about, disruptive technologies. It's all about innovation. Again, in OVHcloud, what makes it easy, I would say, for us is that we do control the value chain. So we are able to work at the server level, we are able to work at the rack level, we are able to work at the data center level, and to try and introduce new technologies to decrease the impact on the environment. But we don't do it, with the magic wand. It's something which is done continuously. So in average, we apply between 15 to 30 patents per year to cover those technologies. So it's a lot of effort on the R&D side, and it's a lot of effort on the field as well, because not only we have to think about the future, but we have at some point to upgrade and to retrofit the existing infrastructure. So it's a lot of collaboration all across the company, on the people running the infrastructure and on the people designing the infrastructure as well.
Excellent. Do you have any kind of key things you want? I mean, we're running out of time now, I'm afraid, Gregory. So this is kind of my last question. Do you have any key things that you want the end users listening to this to take away?
Yeah, I would say, as I mentioned at one point in time, I was talking about standards, I was talking about transparency with respect to the impact on the environment. I would really hope that the end user would be very knowledgeable as far as those impacts and the way to measure it, so that they are really able to understand the figures which are collecting and which are distributing by the industry. That's very important to be skeptical whenever someone is giving you figures. So number one, to be knowledgeable. And number two is to definitely understand, okay, I'm using cloud. What is the impact? So for that sake, for example, we have recently launched a carbon calculator, which is by far the most complete and comprehensive carbon calculator of the industry. It's a good way to really measure accurately the impact on the carbon side, just to mention the carbon side. By doing so, the customer can easily compare things and can easily see, for example, which kind of cloud move to cloud scenario is the best in terms of impact on the environment. Why go the route of dedicated servers when you can maybe use public cloud, which would be better in terms of carbon emissions, because it's a multi-tenant type of service that would put many customers on the same equipment. So this type of arbitration can be done whenever you've got the information in the first place, but still you need to do this arbitration. So that would be my recommendation.
Excellent stuff, Gregory. Well, I think that's been incredibly illuminating. I think you guys at OVHcloud have an awesome approach to this topic. I'm so impressed by all of that. Thanks for coming on the show, Gregory.
Thank you very much, David. Have a good day.
Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me that all that Gregory just told us there was fascinating, and the sustainability topic is obviously crucially important. Also, contact me if you've got any thoughts on the CMA investigation into the cloud landscape. Any other questions, info@cloudindustryforum.org. As I'm always saying, we do this every Monday at 10 o'clock live, so hopefully you can join us next week.